Hello, everybody, and welcome to From Poverty to Progress, the channel that promotes an awareness and understanding of human material progress. My name is Michael Magoon. I am the author of the From Poverty to Progress book series. The first book in my book series is entitled From Poverty to Progress, and it explains the origin and causes of modern progress. My second book, which I am happy to announce is now available on pre-release, is called Promoting Progress, a radical new agenda to create abundance for all. I take the lessons learned from the theories in the first book and apply a concrete progress-based reform agenda to promote widely shared economic growth for all. And stay tuned to the end of this video for a free book giveaway. Today, I'm going to continue the Why the Left is Wrong series, in where I argue that the policies of the left are unintentionally undermining progress, while conservatives offer no real alternative. So we need a third option that truly promotes widely shared progress. Today, I'm going to focus on why the left is wrong about natural gas. Now, in the 1990s, environmentalists and most people on the left were actually pro-natural gas, and a lot of people forget that. Today, though, the environmental movement has been completely taken over by climate activists and Greens who demonize natural gas because they consider all fossil fuels to be a bad thing that need to be abolished. So first, let's understand why environmentalists supported natural gas in the 1990s in the first place. Remember back then, coal was the dominant producer of electricity, and coal has extremely high levels of carbon monoxide, nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, and mercury, all of which are very bad air pollution. And natural gas has dramatically lower levels of all of those pollutants. At the same time, natural gas was competitively priced with coal and other energy sources. And though environmentalists weren't as concerned about carbon emissions back then, natural gas had also significantly lower levels of carbon emissions. Environmentalists realized that the only viable energy source that could replace coal, nuclear, and hydroelectric was natural gas. And the environmental movement was opposed to all three of those energy sources, and they saw natural gas as finally a clean alternative to particularly coal, which dominated electricity. But then with the climate change movement, everything changed. Natural gas went from being a good thing to being a bad thing. I'm here to argue why we should consider natural gas a very good thing, not just for the environment, but also for the economy. The green goal is to eliminate fossil fuels, but I think that's the wrong goal. I believe the goal of our energy policy should be to promote long-term economic growth with an energy system that is abundant, affordable, and secure. At the same time, we need to mitigate the negative side effects, such as carbon emissions, pollution, and public safety. I believe the environmental movement should focus on going beyond coal. The goal should be to rapidly phase out coal, which is the worst in terms of pollution and carbon emissions, and construct a new energy system that is abundant, affordable, and secure based on natural gas, nuclear power, and hydroelectric power. Now, the exact blend of those will depend on geography and the local cost structure, but particularly in North America, natural gas is quite simply a no-brainer. To understand why, let's look at the chemistry of hydrocarbons. Now, hydrocarbons are long, complicated chains of hydrogen, carbon, and other elements. The energy from hydrocarbons comes from burning the hydrogen. The carbon is an accidental byproduct of that combustion. The total amount of carbon emissions per energy produced is roughly determined by the ratio of hydrogen to carbon. So let's take a look at the four most important sources of energy throughout history. Wood, which was the dominant form of energy before the Industrial Revolution, has an HC ratio that is approximately 1 to 10. That's really bad. And in fact, most people don't realize that in terms of carbon emissions, wood is actually the worst form of energy. For coal, the HC ratio is 1 to 2, so we're getting better, but still not very good. For oil, now it flips. Now the HC ratio is 2-to-1. And finally, for natural gas, you get a 4-to-1 ratio, which is by far the best of all hydrocarbons. Now, over the last 2 centuries, we've seen 3 fundamental energy transitions. One, during the Industrial Revolution, we transitioned from wood and muscle power to coal. The second energy transition took place in the late 19th and early 20th century, where we went from coal and we added on petroleum. And then finally, we're in the middle of a third energy transition, which includes natural gas. Now, notice in each one of these transitions, there is a gradual increase in the HC ratio, which means that decarbonization is not something that is coming from green policies. It has been something that has naturally been happening over the last 200 years without any government intervention. Most of the decarbonization took place before human beings even realized there was such a thing as climate change. Now, the green movement effectively wants a fourth energy transition to renewable energies, particularly solar and wind. But there are a lot of disadvantages with solar and wind. One, they only produce electricity, which is only 19% of carbon emissions. Wind and solar cannot be modulated, in other words, cranked up and down in terms of the amount of electrical production due to consumer demand. The production varies greatly by geography. Some areas are great for wind and some areas are great for solar, but they're relatively scarce. Production also varies greatly over time, year to year, season to season, day to day, even hour to hour. Solar and wind are also very land intensive. The single most important thing for protecting the environment is to protect natural habitat. Wind and solar make that more difficult. Wind and solar are also very materials intensive. Wind requires huge amounts of steel, and solar requires many raw materials that require mining. Because of all the characteristics I listed above, wind and solar make electrification of transportation far more difficult. And finally, you can't even manufacture wind and solar without using coal. So I'm going to go into more detail on each one of these in future episodes. But for now, it's important to realize that there are serious disadvantages to wind and solar, which is exactly why we have not seen a decline in fossil fuel usage. Solar and wind are not replacing fossil fuels. Solar and wind are in addition to fossil fuels. Now, in and of itself, that's not a problem. But the goal of the green movement is to eliminate fossil fuels, and solar and wind are clearly not doing that. And there is a much more viable option: natural gas. Between 2005 and 2019, the United States saw a very substantial decline in carbon emissions, and 65% of that decline was caused by natural gas power plants coming online to replace coal-burning power plants. Only 30% of the decline was due to renewable energy. So if you want to reduce carbon emissions, natural gas is the best way to go. And the United States isn't the only place this has happened. In the United Kingdom, coal use did not peak after 2000 when green energy started coming online. Coal use actually peaked in 1956. Now, how did it start to go down? It's simple. The United Kingdom started installing more and more natural gas power plants so they could take their coal-burning power plants offline. The same thing happened in Germany, particularly in the 1990s, long before they started investing in green energy. Natural gas has an enormous number of advantages. First of all, it's inexpensive. Assuming the government allows drilling and pipeline construction, natural gas is a very cost-effective source of energy. There are proven reserves large enough to last generations. We're not going to run out of natural gas anytime soon. As I stated before, natural gas has very low carbon emissions and extremely low levels of pollutants, no radiation, minimal health and safety hazards, and it's very cost effective to store and transport natural gas via pipelines. But there are some important weaknesses. First of all, until 2006, natural gas was relatively expensive compared to coal, and prices were highly volatile. And it's difficult to transport natural gas over oceans. What makes natural gas so useful, however, is its versatility. Natural gas can be used for baseload electricity production, in other words, running 24/7 at a constant amount, or it can be used as a peaker electricity production, which is adjusting to short-term supply and demand. Those adjustments are particularly caused by intermittent wind and solar. Natural gas can be used in industry as a petroleum feedstock. It can be used in commercial purposes, and it can be used for home appliances. There's no other energy source that even comes close to this level of versatility. Only natural gas can cost-effectively replace coal in industrial uses, and only natural gas can cost-effectively replace oil in the production of petroleum byproducts, which are central to so many of our consumer products. The major problem with natural gas is that it is not ideal for transportation until the invention of the electric car. Now, there have been three major changes in the gas industry over the last 30 years. One was the deregulation by the federal government in 1992. Two is the shale gas revolution, which started in 2006. And three is the widespread adoption of combined cycle gas turbines. Before 1992, the natural gas industry was highly regulated. Starting with the Natural Gas Act of 1938, the Federal Power Commission effectively set gas rates, and this made natural gas uncompetitive, particularly in comparison to coal. Deregulation started in 1978, but it really didn't have an impact until 1992. Now, before 2006, all drilling was in what was called conventional gas fields. Methane is the byproduct of the decay of organic matter under the high pressures and heat underground. That organic material is concentrated in one area, and it gradually seeps upward from the source rock until it hits a capstone, which effectively makes it impossible for it to move up. In that area then creates a vast reservoir of oil and natural gas. Because that migration takes tens of millions of years in constantly moving rock, it's very hard to predict exactly where that natural gas is going to go. So oftentimes, industry will drill in an area that looks good, but it doesn't actually contain significant amounts of oil and gas. Conventional gas drilling is essentially drilling straight down into a gas reservoir with one extraction pipe, and you typically have a few massive fields that require huge amounts of capital investment, taking decades of exploration, drilling, and extraction. Each one of these fields has a very high risk of finding little or no gas, and that gas must be extracted immediately and continue to do so until it's uneconomical. So what this means effectively is there's declining output over time. And in such an industry, only very large energy companies can afford to try. All of these factors led to very long time decisions between the decision to explore and sell, widely varying outputs over time, related to that, widely varying prices. So this means it was difficult to rely on natural gas because the price was constantly changing. Now, until recently, natural gas was burned in what's called a simple gas turbine cycle to produce electricity. It's essentially the same as a jet engine on an airplane. You pour in natural gas, you burn it, and that turns a turbine. Now, the good thing about that, they can start up and stop very quickly. The bad thing about it is the energy efficiency isn't so great. It's about 35 to 42% of the energy in the natural gas is converted into electricity. Now that's pretty good, but as you'll see, we can get a lot better than that today. Now, to a large extent, because of the deregulation of the natural gas industry, we had two major technological revolutions. One is shale gas, and the other are combined cycle gas turbines, which are far more energy efficient than the simple cycle gas turbines. First of all, what is shale gas? Well, in conventional fields, you have essentially a reservoir of gas trapped in one area where you drill down into it and the pressure pushes it up. In shale gas, however, The gas is actually trapped within shale rock. They're very small amounts, and it was thought that it would be uneconomical to explore and extract. But a number of technological innovations enabled the economic extraction of shale gas. So effectively what shale gas drilling does, you drill downwards, then you drill sideways along the shale bed, you force in the fracking material of water and sand to push out the gas, and then you pump it out at high pressure up to the surface. With new shale gas production, it's dramatically lower levels of capital investment up front. Exploration and drilling, instead of taking decades, now often takes less than 1 month, and there's a much higher success rate of finding gas. Producers can also cap the pipe to extract the gas at a later date if the price is currently low. And they can drill dozens of pipes at the same rig at different depths and in different lateral directions. And as the technologies improve, the extraction rate is gradually increasing over time. So what all this means is, instead of having a few major natural gas producers, now it's dozens of small producers who are competing against each other to extract as much gas as possible at a time when the prices are high enough to make it warranted. All of this dramatically reduces the cost of natural gas and oil. The sales price of shale gas is actually lower than the production cost of conventional gas, which is effectively meaning that they're driving out the big producers out of the gas industry. The reserves for shale gas are also far greater than for conventional fields. And in the absence of regulation, now prices can be very stable because producers can choose when to pump up the gas, and to do so at a time when prices are high. And shale gas has a very small geographical footprint, so it has a very small impact on the environment. And shale gas also no longer uses groundwater. At the beginning of shale gas production, surface water was used, but over time they realized that underground water, which has higher levels of saline, is actually better to use. So now there's no need to pump in vast amounts of water. The weakness of shale gas, however, is that pipelines are needed to transport to market, just like all gas, and each field has unique characteristics that differ from each other. Currently, only the American shale gas industry has the expertise on how to extract shale gas. Really, there's no other country in the world that knows how to do it. So the net effect of all this is that shale gas production has exploded since 2005, and is gradually replacing conventional gas and coal. And shale gas reserves are huge and scattered all across the world. Right now, shale gas is overwhelmingly in the United States. But as you can see from this map, there are shale gas fields in Latin America, in Africa, in Europe, in China, Australia, Southeast Asia, and India. So shale gas is viable all over the world, and we have enormous reserves. Unfortunately, governments typically are not allowing shale gas production. The other technological innovation that made gas much more viable were the adoption of combined cycle gas turbines. Now remember how a gas turbine works. It's essentially just like a jet engine. That's how the older technology worked. The new technology combines together a steam turbine, which essentially uses the heat from the gas turbine, uses it to boil water to create steam, and that steam then turns a steam turbine. This makes the CCGT far more energy effective than traditional gas turbines. Combined cycle gas turbines, compared to other types of energy, have by far the lowest installation cost, except for the simple gas turbines. They can run cost effectively 24/7 for months on end. So they can easily replace coal. They're extremely energy efficient, in the low 60s, getting towards 65% energy conversion. A new combined cycle gas turbine has about 1/3 of the carbon emissions of an existing coal plant, and the overall levels of pollutants are extremely low. There's no radiation or health safety issues, and if you're replacing coal burning power plants, there's no permitting required. You can essentially just drop the gas turbine in and it can sit right next to the coal plant, and then it's running on gas. More recently, the ramp-up time has been reduced to less than 30 minutes. So you can now turn on and off gas turbine engines in a very energy efficient and cost-effective way. All of this means that, particularly in the United States, natural gas is an absolute no-brainer in terms of electricity production. Virtually every use of coal that there is can be done by natural gas. And with shale gas and combined cycle gas turbines, that energy is actually cheaper. So no matter whether you look at it from an environmental perspective or an economic perspective, natural gas is superior. I believe there is a very simple alternative to the green energy policy. First, we should impose a coal tax on all goods mined, processed, and transported and manufactured using coal or electricity generated from coal. This would give the entire world an incentive to move away from coal. Second, we use that money to construct an electrical grid that is abundant, affordable, and secure. It should be based on natural gas, nuclear power, and hydroelectric power. Now, the exact blend in each nation will differ based on their geography and local cost structure. In the United States, natural gas is far cheaper and can be constructed much faster than nuclear power or hydroelectric power. Now, how much would it cost? If we were to replace every single coal-burning power plant in the United States with combined cycle gas turbine plants, it would cost roughly $124 billion, and we could do it in about 5 years. Now think about that for a second. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was to a large extent about green energy, is 4 times that price. And green energy policies have been in effect for 30 years. We can make the full transition in 5 years for far less money. And for each one of these plants, we would reduce carbon emissions by roughly 67%. And even better, it would reduce the price of electricity. So it's better for consumers and it's better for the economy. And we could do the same in Europe for even less cost. We also need to roll back government restrictions on the exploration, drilling, and distribution of natural gas on public and private lands. The main thing that is holding back the third energy transition are government regulations restricting natural gas. We should also phase out all subsidies and mandates for renewable energy. Now, I know Greens are going to flip out from that statement, but realistically, if you replace all coal-burning power plants with extremely energy efficient gas turbines, there's really no reason to be subsidizing renewable energy anymore. The electrical grid will already be so low level in carbon emissions that there's no point in having solar or wind. If it's cost effective without subsidies to produce solar and wind, fine. Let the energy companies make choices based on cost and security. We also need to leverage the technical skills of the American shale gas industry to spread the shale revolution throughout the world. This will make natural gas so affordable that the entire global energy sector will want to shift from coal to natural gas, and they will have an incentive to do so because of the coal tax. With a cheap and stable electrical grid, we can gradually shift the transportation sector from petroleum to electricity, starting in the metro areas, essentially with cars in the metro areas and buses and delivery vans, and then gradually, as it becomes cost effective, expanding it to longer range transportation. So we can have a progress-based energy policy that is more effective than the green energy policy at lowering carbon emissions, lowering pollution, and lowering health risks. And we can do so by helping economic growth and lowering the cost of energy. Instead of driving up the price of energy, we need to make it as inexpensive as possible. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please don't forget to subscribe and like. It really helps the channel to grow. If you'd like more resources, I'd recommend going to my website FromPovertyToProgress.com. With a free email subscription, you get free ebook samples, free audio samples, and you can buy discounted ebooks and audiobooks. If you insist on paying full price, you can get ebooks, paperbacks, and hardcovers at Amazon, or if you're a bookstore or a library, you can get them at Inker and Spark. Audiobooks are available at Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. If you'd like to know more about books related to this content, I'd recommend going to my other website, which is the techratchet.com. It consists of an online library of over 280 book summaries on the topics of technology, history, economic growth, and progress. And now we're getting on to the exciting part, a free book giveaway of my first book, From Poverty to Progress. If you're a regular listener, you already know the rules. If you don't know the rules, please pause this video and read this description. There's a free book giveaway every week. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time.